Anyway, a very good afternoon to everyone, especially Neeraj and Vanessa, who are here on the dais with me. My good friend, Dr. Sandeep Kulshresht, other members of the academic fraternity, the students of NITHM, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to all of you. And first and foremost, let me take this opportunity to place on record my appreciation for the organizers who have invited me and therefore allowed me an opportunity to be here talking to all of you, interacting with you. I'd like to especially thank the organizers of this event, especially Mahinder, who took all the trouble for getting me here. We've already had some glimpses of search and research. So I was really amused by the research done by Nikita when she, read about me. So she read so many things about me, which perhaps, I had also forgotten. So she really did some good research. And unfortunate, but yes, the third speaker who is slated to talk to us this afternoon is still searching for her lost luggage. So she is in a different kind of research. Anyway, while we wait for Avita to join us, the burden of carrying forward this session is on Vanessa and I. So we'll try our bit to carry forward this discussion. And please don't raise your expectations, according to what Vanessa has said. I'm going to make some very simple points. And this conference is all about sustainable development goals, and probably while the world discusses these issues of sustainability and climate change, codified into sustainable development goals, it is important for us, more important for us because we stand here in the shadow of G20 summit with India as the president of the summit. The world is looking towards India, and world is keen to listen to what India has to say, as India not only assumes the responsibility of the presidency of G20, but India also supposedly portrays itself as the voice of the South or the underdeveloped and emerging economies. So what does India have to say on all these issues? I'll try to sum up all of these in next 5 to 10 minutes, and then we probably have an open discussion. We might even be interested in taking some of your questions. So what I try to do is divide my entire talk in 3 parts. First, very quickly read out for you, for benefit of all of you, the India's scorecard as far as SDGs is concerned, because we're talking about sustainable development goals. So what is that we've been able to achieve? What more needs to be done? What are those areas where we need to work harder? So I have some figures with me just to give you an idea of some of the important SDGs, So starting with no poverty, just giving you some basic figures so that you know what is the trajectory, where is India heading for. So no poverty, the first SDG talks about, the levels of poverty were almost 45% in 1993. By 2019, we limited it to 28%. So making a decent, covered a decent distance there. Zero hunger, undernourished people in 1992 were around 23.7%. We've been able to reduce this to a level of 14% in 2019. Third is good health and well-being. So life expectancy in India in 1991 was 61. We still do not have the 2021 census reports with us. So 2019, the estimated life expectancy was 69 years compared to 61 years in 1990. I am told, but this is only provisional, that perhaps the life expectancy has crossed the 70-year mark. Quality education, literacy in 1991 was 52%. 2011 census put it at 77%. We are 12 years ahead of 2011. So again, a giant leap there. Clean water and sanitation. Another one was gender equality. So we have been doing, it's more of a qualitative, so we don't have a quantitative measure for it. So I'm skipping that. Clean water sanitation, 1919, access to clean water was 76% people had access to clean water in 1990. 2015, it increased to 93% of Indians. So again, a commendable thing. Affordable and clean energy. As of now, around 24% of all our energy comes from clean energy sources. So that is what we have achieved in last few years. Decent work and economic growth, another important SDG. Our economic growth was roughly 7.5% between 2014 and 2019, which was among the fastest among the large economies of the world. Post-pandemic also, among the large economies of the world, India is one of the fastest growing economy, slated to grow at a rate of almost 6.5%. So India stands on a firm footing, and you would appreciate that our foreign direct investment, is increasing. Okay, so we have the third speaker also here with us. Yeah, so FDI is swelling and it's coming up, but what is more interesting to note is that this FDI comes from 161 countries of the world across 61 sectors of economy. So that is how broad-based our growth is and the trust that the world reposes in Indian economy. 161 countries investing in India. Another one is reduced inequalities in terms of access to healthcare, education, and other services. So the Gini coefficient was 0.49 in 2010, which got reduced to 0.35 in 2020. So we have been more equitable in our, offerings. Sustainable cities and communities. Most of the audience is a younger lot, so they've seen a better India. But if you compare India, say 20 years back and today, there's a lot of urban planning, there's a lot of planning that is going into India, a lot of the smart cities coming up. And I come from a place called Noida in Uttar Pradesh, which is bordering Delhi, is a glaring example of how you can, transform your cities, your urban communities. Really developed in a very, very smart way last 4 or 5 years. And then there is this whole concept and whole wave of responsible consumption and production, which is another important SDGs. Look at the way we have put in effort and money into the Swachh Bharat mission or the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. I remember doing a book in 2013, and what we did in that book was invite teachers of Indian origin who were dealing with tourism, and some of those teachers or some of those academics who were very closely watching India, and Vanessa did contribute a chapter to that book. And one of the authors of one of the chapters in that book made an observation which eventually became the theme of some of the talks that I delivered. And the gist of it was, in Hindi and Urdu, it was, Acha hai par ganda hai. So that is how they refer to India, that India is a good place, but it is not as clean as it should have been. But things have changed in last 10 years. Today, India is a much better maintained place. And needless to comment on India's commitment to climate change. We have been party to so many international forums and clearly demonstrating our commitment to climate change. The second part of my presentation was what are some of the areas where tourism and hospitality research could contribute to SDGs. And I'm talking about a global thing, all-pervasive thing, that of all the SDGs, again, let me come out with a disclaimer, and the disclaimer is that tourism is all-pervasive. It permeates through almost everything and everyone. Whatever we do, whosoever we are in a way directly, indirectly connected to tourism. So there's a lot of talk of tourism, or a lot of tourism which connects all of us. So none of these SDGs can be left out of the purview of tourism, but I have picked up a few of them to talk about. So again, I'll try to be brief. Say for example, no poverty, SDG 1. So there's a lot that tourism and hospitality research can do. I was talking to my good friend Shahid Saab today morning, and we were talking about how state after state, province after province in India are, contemplating using tourism as a poverty alleviation tool, especially through the vehicle of community-based tourism, which is a very important vehicle insofar the developing economies are concerned. Research in tourism and hospitality can always suggest how we can, move further or move forward with sustainable and inclusive growth. The other SDG that I would like to talk about is SDG 3, which is good health and well-being. Very interestingly, my department, my university, we do a lot of research where we talk about therapeutic benefits of traveling. And one of the triggers of this of our getting into this research was the non-religious dimension of tourism. So our slogan is, all tourism is transformational, all tourism has a spiritual connotation, and when I say spiritual, I'm strictly talking about non-religious spiritualism. The reason why we got motivated with this whole concept of non-religious spiritual travel or transformational travel was that when we were looking at data from India, India is right now through this stage of window of opportunity, as they call, or during this phase of demographic dividend. But one of the challenges that India faces is the kind of psychological stress, strain, and disorders that are rampant among Indian youth. The calculation is that it is going to take us almost 50 years to, provide for sufficient psychological support to our young generation, whereas the window of opportunity is open only until 2052-53. So what do we do? And then we stumbled upon this idea that there's a lot of healing and spiritual dimension that is associated with traveling, and maybe traveling as a therapy to address or counter these psychological challenges could be there. So this is just one example how research in tourism and hospitality can provide us with some insights where we are free to experiment. The other SDG is quality education, and definitely all of us must understand and realize and appreciate it that post-COVID, it's a new world, a new skill landscape has come, and like any other sector, tourism and hospitality academia also has the responsibility to figure out what are the new teaching and training needs that we'll have to, roll out. Another important thing which came out of a small research at our end was, and I'm just sharing it using it as an example, was that all this time tourism and hospitality education has been talking about training people on the supply side of the equation. So we're training people to be service providers either in hospitality or tourism, but probably the way people have grown conscious, the way consumers have grown conscious, maybe it's high time universities in India, and which includes tourism and hospitality, consider training and teaching and education of consumers, because consumption has to be more conscious in times to come. So how do I become a more conscious consumer? Probably I'll have to go back to school, and then the school must design curricula. So we need a lot of research to upgrade the quality of our education. Tourism, no doubt, is a big enabler as far as gender equality is considered. Globally speaking, 4 out of 10, which is almost 40% jobs in tourism sectors are taken up by women. So it's a great leveler. So that was SDG 5, gender equality. In some countries around the world, I know the data suggests that's more than 50%. Again, the other interesting thing and brighter side of the data is, or the brighter side of the picture as the data paints, is that at the bottom of the pyramid, at the level of marginalized communities, the participation of women and the scope of participation of women is even higher. Again, some of the researchers, especially in my university, I'll keep coming back to the examples from my university. They're working with communities in Uttarakhand, which is a state close to NCR, Himachal Pradesh. A lot of small businesses where women are taking lead. So that's another. Just 2 more SDGs. SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. I've already spoken about economic growth and the kind of leveler that tourism is. For that, the group that is sitting on the back benches, the students, tourism is a darling of all governments around the world, because it does not only brings in a lot of money, it also distributes money equitably. So when you're talking about development, it's not only growth, it's also equitable distribution of wealth. No community is going to survive until unless it ensures that the wealth generated by the community is also equitably distributed. Tourism, hospitality does that. How to make it more efficient is the responsibility of researchers in tourism and hospitality. So probably there's some scope for them to work in those things. And of course, SDG 12, which is responsible consumption and production. So it's about talking, we are in an era when the world of business is talking about concepts like net positivity. We in India and around the world have been talking about sustainable tourism development. And then it was the researchers and few leaders of the industry who came up with this whole concept of regenerative tourism. We still, what is going to be a good model? How are we going to balance economy, environment, ecology, and society are still challenges before the research community. And just to give you a few idea, there's still a big debate, between the East and the West. The Western world always believe when they're talking about sustainable development, they say sustainable development, roughly speaking, it says that leave the world the way it was created. Whereas the Eastern philosophies, which includes India, China, Southeast Asia, their whole concept of sustainability hinges around the concept that God has created man as an important interventionist to the development. So God has created world, and now it's the responsibility of us humans to make it a better place. So is it the responsibility of all of us to make it a better place, or do we leave it? So there are debates. These are academic debates, and researchers and academics need to participate in debates like these and other debates as well. I already spoke about educating consumers, designing products. So those are some of the important SDGs. There are a few more, but I'll not list them for the time that we have. The third speaker has already joined us. And if I stand here, I'm not doing justice as an academic to the time that has been allotted to me if I'm not critical of academia, which includes researchers also, where they are failing or where the challenges are. So I'll quickly list 7 challenges without elaborating on those. 1, we are still struggling. I'm talking of tourism and hospitality researchers in India as they try to figure out issues related to SDGs. So very specific 7 things. One, lack of data on the impact of tourism activities on nature and environment, economy, society. Second, limited research funding. So we still don't have a lot of community trust in the researches that we do, which gets reflected in the kind of funding that is available to tourism and hospitality researchers. Third reason, or the third issue, is outcome of the second, and third is, and we need to introspect, low research capacities. So in India, in particular, tourism and hospitality academia is still struggling with its capabilities to do good quality research. Fragmentation, so many stakeholders, how do you bring them together? When you do research, how do you bring in those multiple perspectives is a challenge. Fourth, lot of research is imported research. A lot of us do research based on models which are derived from the Western world or earlier research. So what goes missing in the process is the local context. So we need to touch those local issues in terms of tradition, culture, society. What are the pressing demands of the contemporary Indian society? They cannot be overlooked. Those issues have to be addressed whenever you carry out research. The sixth is sustainability trade-off, which I already mentioned, the trade-off between economics, environment, and society. And unfortunately, research is not helping us, arrive at that good spot or the equilibrium where we should be. And finally, last is the policy implementation. Even if we do research, the only thing we do is come to a conference or an event like this, make a presentation to the people who readily accept our ideas, but the people on the ground who need to implement the findings of this research is missing. So there's a big disconnect with the implementers, which is people on the ground practicing tourism, or government, which is taking care of this whole concept of, tourism planning. So there's this big disconnect. So we need to be talking to them more often, on more occasions, probably run to them, and they also need to appreciate our researches. So these are some of the challenges before researchers in India, tourism and hospitality researchers in India. So with that, I'll take back my place and allow more time to my other fellow panelists who would be open to your questions later in the session. Thank you very much.